rainbow numbers being worn by the US team, a US soccer initiative in partnership with the You Can Play project, dedicated to equality, respect for all athletes regardless of sexual orientation.
I think it was great that US Soccer decided to do something different and participate in the whole Pride Month. And I think for me, it just means inclusion. Everybody should feel that they are entitled to do whatever they want to do and be who they want to be.
Wearing the rainbow numbers represents equality for me, and that's what this team's all about. That's what we support, and that's the message we want to send.
Just to see how far everybody has come, to be able to show that and show our fan base, and it's actually kind of special to do it abroad. Obviously Scandinavia is very, very liberal, so we're not telling them anything that they don't already know, but it's pretty special to be able to bring that message and kind of spread that to our fans, not only at home, but across the world as well, as this game continues to grow, especially on the women's side.
Should one of the best players for the U.S. women's soccer team be kept off because of her religious beliefs?
So this is kind of similar. We have a theme going this morning. So a controversial figure in women's soccer is now no longer playing in Team USA's upcoming tournament. Her name is Jaylene Hinkle, and she was cut from the final 23 for the team. Now, Hinkle actually got national attention after she declined to play on the national team last year. So why did she decline? Well, she actually refused to wear the rainbow-colored numbers on the jerseys celebrating Pride Month. For her, it was a choice of conscience and faith. Others took it as a show of homophobia. The U.S. soccer spokesman said she was cut based on her performance, but some questioned the move. She has that right. I'm just going to come out the gate. If she does not feel comfortable wearing the rainbow to signify that the USA soccer is in alignment with the LGBT community, then she has every right to say, I'm not going to play.
Right, and they have the right to not play her. So it should have been that one game. It shouldn't have been that she was cut from the team or couldn't play at all. You just don't play that game.
Right.
We're going to celebrate this particular thing. If it's against your religious beliefs, then you have the right not to play. Right. So you sit on the bench that game, and then when we wear our regular colors, you come on out. But to cut her from the team, we need her.
I don't get that. I don't get that. It's kind of reminiscent of the big Supreme Court case where the baker refused to make the cake for the gay couple, and that went all the way up to the Supreme Court, and the religious beliefs and whatnot. So yeah, but I agree. One game, that's it. You don't wear the colors, move on.
But the cutter hole, no.
Yeah. It's all about respect. It's all about respect. Both sides, folks. Come on now. Next.
An epidemic of whiplash broke out in the soccer world today as U.S. Soccer announced that Jaylene Hinkle, who refused to call up to the women's national team in 2017 on the basis that she didn't want to wear a rainbow number for the team's Pride Month initiative, will not make the roster for the Tournament of Nations after all. Undoubtedly, the team will say this is a purely on-the-field decision. Indeed, it's perfectly normal for players to be called into camp, assessed, and then cut if the coaching staff doesn't think they're playing at a high enough level. But as I wrote last week, anyone who pays attention to the NWSL will be scratching their heads. Hinkle, views aside, has been hands down the best left-back in the league this season, and fits the profile of what coach Jill Ellis has said she wants at that position: good as a one-on-one defender, blazing fast to get up and down the wings, and an excellent crosser. The list of other options for left-sided wide defenders is also incredibly thin, made up mostly of converted forwards and naturally right-footed players. Also cut from the roster was Kayla Ohio of the Houston Dash. Of course, it's entirely possible Hinkle went into camp and played poorly, for whatever reason. It's also entirely possible Ellis doesn't think she did well, whether or not other observers would agree. But there are other possibilities here, and to be clear, this is complete speculation on my part. One is that USSF hugely underestimated the backlash Hinkle's call-up would be greeted with by the sport's LGBTQ fans and allies, and decided to backtrack. Another is that they didn't actually intend to cap Hinkle, and only brought her into camp to quell speculation that she was being kept off the team due to her religious views that oppose LGBTQ rights. Ellis is LGBTQ and married to a woman. Regardless, this is blowing up in the federation's faces. Purely from a soccer perspective, it's difficult to see why Hinkle didn't make the team. If you don't buy that she was cut simply for on-the-field reasons, as many people won't, the U.S. Soccer Federation now looks to be wavering between taking a stand in favor of the queer players, staff, and fans, then not taking that stand, to now, maybe, taking it again. We may never know exactly what happened behind the scenes, but this difficult situation is getting even more difficult for USSF.
Well, welcome once again to Christ in Culture. My name is Pastor Jeff Short, and today we're going to cover part 3 of the Jalin Hinkle saga. And if you remember the last couple of programs here on Christ in Culture, I've been covering the Jalin Hinkle story. This is a woman Christian soccer player who refused to play for the national women's team because during the Pride Month, the so-called Gay Pride Month of June, she would have to be wearing a Gay Pride rainbow jersey that represents behavior that she is totally opposed to as a Christian. Because of her Christian faith, she's opposed to that, as all Christians should be. Not all Christians are, because they're inconsistent, but here is a woman who is a consistent Christian, and she reads her Bible and she believes her Bible, and it tells her that homosexual behavior, it teaches in the Old Testament is wrong, it teaches in the New Testament wrong, and 2,000 years of church history has confirmed that this is a grave moral sin. So she said, no, I'm not going to play on a soccer team that makes me wear the gay pride uniform, because there's nothing to be proud about in the gay rights movement. There is something to be disgraceful about. And she says, I won't do it. And so that was last year. In 2017, she says, no, I won't wear that uniform, so I'm going to have to politely decline the invitation to join the national women's team. Okay, this year, 2018, at the time of this recording, she was invited to join the women's team in July. So this is after the so-called Gay Pride Month, where the women still wear that uniform, that rainbow uniform. And Jalin didn't want to wear that uniform last year. Well, she doesn't have to wear that uniform this year because she was called up to the women's team in July, and the so-called Gay Pride Month is gone, done, finished. So she's fine with that. So the last program I was talking about Jalin being called up to the team in July. So that was good news. So you would think, okay, the fairy tale story ends on a good note because she gets to play for the women's team. She has no problem wearing a regular uniform. Of course, she's a professional soccer player and one of the best in the country. So she's called up and she plays for the national team and does well, and everything is good ever after. That's what you would think would happen. But no, there's a twist in this story. Unfortunately, sadly, there's a twist in the story. And the twist is, and I'm reading from an article now in the SB Nation, online SB Nation, by Caitlin Best. And it's marked July 23rd, 2018. And this is the headline. Controversial soccer player Jalin Hinkle cut from the U.S. women's national team. Yes, the same Jalin who was called up to the women's national team just a couple days ago, and now she's already cut from the women's team. So what's going on here? What's happening? Something sounds suspicious. Something doesn't sound right here. And so we're going to look at this article by Caitlin Best from SB Nation online. So I'm just going to read this and we're going to go through it, because it sounds like the LGBT lobby, the LGBTQ community has found a way to get this Christian woman off the team anyway, but we'll get into that later. Let's go into the article and I'll comment on the article. She says, an epidemic of whiplash broke out in the soccer world today as U.S. Soccer announced that Jalin Hinkle, who refused a call-up to the women's national team in 2017 on the basis that she didn't want to wear a rainbow number for the team's Pride Month initiative, will not make the roster of the Tournament of Nations after all. Undoubtedly, the team will say that it is purely based on an on-field decision. Indeed, it's perfectly normal for players to be called into camp, assessed, and then cut if the coaching staff doesn't think they're playing at a high enough level. But as I wrote last week, Caitlin Best must have wrote this last week in some article online. As I wrote last week, anyone who pays attention to the Women's National Soccer League will be scratching their heads. And that's what I saw when I read this article. I said, wait a minute, what? What's the point of calling a person and then 2 days later cutting them? There's something strange here. There's something weird. There's something going on below the surface, and it's not kosher. It doesn't feel right. Something's wrong here. Hinkle, views aside, has been hands down the best left back in the league this season. Now think about that. I don't know a lot about soccer. I don't follow soccer a lot. I go in for more of the traditional American sports, but I'm beginning to like soccer. I could be drawn into soccer. It's just that I haven't been a viewer of soccer and I haven't been following it enough, especially women's soccer. So it's a situation for me is I just don't follow soccer. I don't know the positions. Of course, everyone knows the goalie. But the other positions, I'm not up on what they call the other positions. And so it must be that Jalin Hinkle is a left back. And as I gather, that's more of a defensive position. But according to this sports writer, she is hands down the best left back in the league. So this Christian soccer player who stood on her principles is not just a Christian and not just a committed Christian, but she's a really, really good soccer player. And according to this sports writer, she's the best left back in the league, hands down. So they've called up the best left back in the league to play on the women's national team and represent the U.S. in the month of July. So it says, and she fits the profile of what coach Jill Ellis has said that she wants in that position. So fits the position perfect. Good as a one-on-one defender, blazing fast to get up and down the wings, and an excellent crosser. And I'm not even sure what that term means, an excellent crosser. But it definitely is something positive. The list of other options for left-sided wide defenders is also incredibly thin. So she's standout in a field where there aren't a whole lot of position players in that spot to draw from. Made up mostly of converted forwards and naturally right-footed players. Also cut from the roster was Kalia Ohai of the Houston Dash. Okay, so she's a great player. She's totally qualified based on her performance and her statistics in every measurable category. So she's called to the women's team, and then the article goes on. And of course, it's entirely possible Hinkle went into camp and played poorly. Yeah, it's possible. For whatever reason, it's also entirely possible Ellis doesn't think she did well, whether or not other observers would agree. Yeah, it's possible. I mean, it's possible, for example, if you had the best player at this left back position, the best player in the league, she goes into the camp, they need her for that position, and she plays really bad in camp. That's possible, it's mathematically possible, but how probable is that? Very thin, very thin. I mean, if she's the best left back in the league, and they call her up, and they really need a left back, wouldn't you think they would take her even if she had a poor showing in the trials? Wouldn't you think they would take her on the team and just see how she does in the actual competition? I mean, she's the best left back in the league. You would give her the benefit of the doubt and say, well, maybe she's not feeling well today, or maybe she's got some problem. Maybe she's got a stomach ache or some temporary illness, or maybe she's nervous. All of the press attention, whatever. You would give her the benefit of the doubt because your team needs this position filled, and here is the best left back in the whole soccer league, women's soccer league. And so you would say, we're going to have her on the team because we need her, and she's good. We know that. And plus, you don't judge whether a person is good based on a day or two workout when you have an entire record. Jaylin has an entire record of pro soccer playing to prove that she's good. And you can ask the other players whether she's good. And you can ask the sports writers whether she's good. So there's not this idea that she didn't play well. That doesn't sound right. There's something wrong there. And this writer brings out the point where the coach, Jill Ellis, possibly didn't think that Jaylin Hinkle played well in the tryout for the national team. So it could be just the coach, because this writer says, and well, others, whether others or not observers would have agreed that she didn't play well. So all it comes down to is this coach, Jill Ellis, if she thought Jaylin didn't play very well, she could cut her from the team, and did. And it boils down to basically her decision. We'll come back to her decision in just a minute. Let's go on. But there are other possibilities here for her not making the team. And to be clear, this is complete speculation on my part, the Caitlin Best says in her article. One is that the USSF hugely underestimated the backlash Hinkle's call-up would be greeted with by the sport's LGBTQ fans and allies. Okay, so now we're getting into politics. It's not the sport of soccer anymore. It's not the playing on the field. It's not the individual players' talents. It's the politics of women's soccer in 2018. And it's the LGBTQ lobby's power to get their way. That sounds very interesting. And the soccer league decided to backtrack. So they needed a left back. They chose the league's best left back to call up to the national team. They called her up, and then a few days later, like 2 days later, cut her for no apparent reason. It's not like she totally was a flop and just was the worst player that they have ever seen, and we don't know why we even called this person. No, there was nothing like that describing why. It was simply that the coach didn't like her. The coach didn't feel she played well, which is strange because she's played well in all other venues in soccer. So why would she not play well for the women's national team, and why would she not play well in the tryouts? That's very strange. And this writer's, one of her possible explanations for this move is that the backlash from the gay lobby was so strong that soccer had to do something and backtrack on their call-up of Jalen. Another possibility is that they didn't actually intend to cap Hinkle and only brought her into camp to quell speculation that she was being kept off the team due to her religious views that oppose LGBTQ rights. Ellis, the coach, is LGBTQ and is married to a woman. So the coach, so the woman who decides the fate of Jalen is LGBTQ. She's a lesbian. She's married to a woman, and she decided to cut Jalen Hinkle for no apparent reason. Wow. And this last explanation by the sports writer here is that they only intended to bring her on the team. They never intended to really play her or use her. They just brought her on the team so that they could say, well, we tried, we brought her on the team, but she just didn't play well enough, so we're going to have to cut her. In other words, they wanted to cover all the bases so that they would avoid any possible legal lawsuit of discrimination based on religion, any possible legal or even rumors that Jalen was not called up because of her sincerely held Christian beliefs. So she was just called up as a formality so that the soccer league could say, well, we tried, we really tried, but she just didn't cut it. She didn't make the team. That's one of the explanations that this sports writer. Now, is this sports writer a cynic? Is this sports writer kind of skeptical and cynical and always looking for the worst possible reason? I don't think so in this case. I think those are very good possible motives as to why Jalen Hinkle was cut. Because the idea that she didn't play well just doesn't make sense at all. It just doesn't make sense at all. So the article goes on. Regardless, this is blowing up in the Federation's face. Purely from a soccer perspective, it's difficult to see why Hinkle didn't make the team. That's the big and irrefutable fact. It's hard to understand why she didn't make the team based purely on performance. If you don't buy that she was simply cut for her on-the-field reasons, as many won't, the U.S. Soccer Federation now looks to be wavering between taking a stand in favor of their queer players, staff, and fans, then not taking a stand to now maybe taking it again. And then she concludes, we may never know exactly what happened behind the scenes, but this is a difficult situation, and it's getting even more difficult for the United States Soccer Federation. So, you have a number of different possibilities as to why this Christian soccer player was cut from the team. And 3 out of the 4 possibilities involve reasons that are less than honorable, less than plausible. The idea that she was cut because she wasn't good enough is very suspect. In fact, we can almost eliminate that right out of hand. Unless she was sick, unless she was injured, unless for some reason there was some physical problem that she had that prevented her from playing the way she normally plays. And then in that case, we can understand. But it sure looks to be that Jalen Hinkle was basically shafted, as they call it. She was given the shaft. she was given the raw deal. And there's another possibility that she might have had an invitation to the team, and then she was cut because of how she dissed the team last year. The Soccer Federation might have said, well, we called her up last year and she said no because she didn't want to wear the gay pride flag on her jersey. So that was an embarrassment to us and an insult to us. So we're going to call her up this year and then cut her, which is an insult to her and an embarrassment to her. Okay, maybe it was a tit for tat. Maybe it was because the lesbian coach doesn't like Jalin Hinkle. Maybe it was because the other people on the team, the other women on the team, resented Jalin because they all went along with the gay pride jersey last year and this year, and Jalin didn't. And maybe there was friction in the locker room. We just really don't know. But it looks like that this young Christian woman who stood strong for Christ and is standing strong for Christ and living out her Christian faith is being discriminated against. And it's unfair. And this is a form of religious persecution. And it's a sad thing to see. And we just need to pray for her that God continues to bless her, even though it's not going to be on the team this year, and that all of this works out and God is glorified in the process. Well, I hope that's been helpful, and we'll see everyone back on another episode of Christ in Culture. This is Pastor Jeff Short. God bless.